Welcome to the Predictable Revenue Podcast, where frontline sales leaders teach you how to build and scale an outbound sales team. All right, welcome back, everybody. We're here with Jon from GuideSpark, Senior Director of Enterprise Sales. We're going to start today by talking about Jon's quota for the year. No pressure, Jon.
And boom, you're like.
So, can you tell us a little bit about your quota? How are you guys gold?
Yeah, so our what we call our new business or new logo team, we shoulder the brunt of our new ARR target for the company and the organization by quite a big margin. Our account management team and the channel management teams sort of round out the rest. And you're talking about from an ARR perspective or from like a new business sales executive perspective or
yeah, from new bookings perspective.
New bookings, yeah.
Plus whatever you or the team is comped on.
Yeah, so we're all comped on ARR. Yeah. Yeah, it's it's a race, it's a challenge. There's a lot of pressure to deliver, and I'm not going to get into specifics on what the numbers are, but it's a good chunk. We'll just leave it at that.
Great. Just sort of diving in on that. What are you guys going to do to help hit this giant R goal?
Yeah, it's a challenge for sure. I think we've taken a lot of good steps around sales process, around our tech stack, the hiring to help us get there, and working with other parts of the organization and product marketing and product teams and customer success teams. I think we get a unique challenge in our addressable market, which is HR and communications. It's a big market, and it's also quite seasonal. So what we need to do is make sure that we're aligning our value prop, driving that to the right person in the right department with the right message at really at the right time. So we've on the new business side, in many cases we've got a 2-to-1 pairing for our most senior reps from an SDR to sales executive standpoint, and everybody else has a 1-to-1. It's a bit of a rich investment, but one that we found is helps us get there. Goals are pretty simple. I mean, from a new business sales standpoint, the goal is to complete 30 net new meetings per month and complete 10 follow-up meetings. Those follow-up meetings will lead to high quality pipeline, and if you just focus on those two, everything will has a way of taking care of itself. From an SDR perspective, we goal them on 4 or 5 metrics. They have to make sure that the meetings that they set up, they've got to have their counterpart complete 30 net new meetings on average.
Complete, not just schedule.
Not just schedule, complete. Yeah, it's like
big difference there.
Yeah. I think our market's challenging. I'm sure everybody struggles with this, but just because you book a meeting doesn't mean that they actually show up. So we want to comp on accomplishment. So yeah, the idea is simple. They feed their reps 30 completed meetings per month. That should generate about 7 opportunities, and we've got a deal advancement sort of criteria so that things are actually progressing through the funnel in a way that you'd expect it to if it's qualified and forecasted as pipeline, and then we do measure on the number of closed deals. Even though it's mostly in the control of the quota-bearing rep, we do comp our STRs on quality. But yeah,
is that a large percentage of their comp?
It's a decent amount. It's not the biggest. I think you've got kind of input-driven measures, and then you've got output-driven measures. So the inputs obviously being the phone calls and the meetings will lead to deals deals being forecasted, move through the pipe, and then ultimately closed.
Okay. Good question. So there's one thing you mentioned before is it's seasonal. How do you account for that when you got monthly goals? Do you look at quarterly, or do they change, or?
So the beauty about it is, this is an oversimplification, but 6 months out of the year, it's selling season for a handful of our addressable market, and it's kind of when things go dark on the other half. And then for 6 months out of the year, it's exactly the opposite, right? So, in open enrollment, for example, everybody, when you go through open enrollment and you select your benefits for the year, that usually happens around Halloween, October or so. And depending upon how big the company is, they're buying in either Q1, Q2, or Q3. But they almost don't do anything in Q4. But that's the exact same time that we're talking to people in, talent management and compensation, talking about like the year-end performance review and how you set up goals for the year. And most comp changes come through in April. So we do have a consistent sort of demand for meetings throughout the year, but you want to make sure that you're calling, the people that are going to buy in the next quarter, more so than the people that just aren't going to buy because they don't have a need for it at that time.
Do your quotas change? Do they go up and down?
No, they're consistent throughout the year.
Yeah, actually, so is the appointment setting results pretty steady, but the revenue is much more cyclical? Or are the appointments, which part is more, the revenue's got to be really seasonal for you, but what about the appointment setting part?
Yeah, when we first started the business, we were kind of a one-trick pony where, we had our target market, and it was, mid-market companies that had benefits people. And, as a result, like something like 90, 100% of our revenue was done in like one quarter of the year. So we were waiting for our kind of Super Bowl. And we've actually smoothed that out quite a bit with just, the strides that we're making into the market and sort of product market fit in other departments. So we haven't completely figured it out just yet, but it's a lot more flat these days. But yeah, from a revenue standpoint, I think, you'll see some weighting towards the back half of the year than you would in the front half. But the meetings is we see a pretty consistent demand throughout the year.
It's one thing it's a question I've heard a lot from people that are in the space or people that are thinking of starting an outbound program. Hey, it's the middle of the summer, or it's not our buying season. Should I still start an outbound program now? And I'm a big fan of, you got a quota this year, don't you? Do you want to hit it? You probably, the best time to start building an SDR team was 3 years ago. The second best time is now.
Yeah.
I'm obviously a little biased. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, look, if there are people out there that could or should benefit from your product or would benefit from knowing that you're out there, look, like people are making decisions right now. We've been at this for, the last 5 or 6 years, and there are still people in our core market that have never even heard of us before. And the only way that we're going to get to them is we're going to usually start out with a cold call or an email and get on their radar. So that's one thing about trying to time a market too, is what we continually learn is every time we think we learn what's going to work in the market, like, we go back and we look back and say, holy smokes, like we always thought Q3 was the time to go and hit our target market because that's when they bought. What we found over the years is it continues to get earlier and earlier and earlier. So we're going after, the large, above 50,000 person orgs because they start making decisions in January, February, and March. So when you call, you don't think it's the buying season. It's people are out there making decisions right now. So that's sort of my thought on that.
Cool. Following up on your previous comment around the number of net new meetings, you said 30 net new meetings and then 10 follow-up meetings. So the completed So 30 net new, that's that they've booked and that a prospect showed up to for your account manager, right?
Yep.
And then what are the follow-up meetings? Can you explain a little bit more there?
Those, and how do you maintain the quality of, it's one thing to get a meeting to happen. Another is it like a worthwhile meeting?
Yeah. So, there's a lot of qualification that happens on both ends. Are we a fit for them? And, do we think they're a good fit for us? So the concept behind the follow-up meeting is that, once, 9 times out of 10, what we do on an initial demo, people are kind of thumbs up. They're like, wow, this is great. I could really, really use this, and so on and so forth. And then we'd have the sales exec reach out, after the meeting, and you're like, hey, it was a great meeting, and they come back and say, yeah, but we're not going to buy. And so the follow-up meetings are sort of a leading indicator into pipeline that's about to be developed. And so the idea being, you get the initial meeting and it goes well and you qualify it. After you have that second meeting, you should really know whether or not this prospect is a buyer. And, it's hard to do what we do in a half hour or an hour meeting, right? You've got to qualify them, you've got to establish value, you've got to learn about their challenges, their business problems, their needs. And, you try to do that in a half hour, that's tough. So that's the reason for the follow-on meetings.
Cool. Hey, troubleshoot something for me. Let's pretend I'm an SDR. I've been with you for a few months. I'm booking my 30 net new meetings every single month, but my guys, my sales engineer, account exec, they're not getting any follow-up meetings. What advice would you offer me? What might I be doing wrong?
Or where do you look first to try to understand?
Yeah, it's I've heard of that happening once or twice. It's common, and I think the biggest advice I'd say I'd probably sit down the SDR and have him focus on things that he can control. If it's at the end of the day, if it's a sales executive that's not listening or not following sales process or just kind of throwing up on themselves, like that SDR can't control that, right? They can only control who they're going to call next, and partner with that sales executive to kind of qualify that person ahead of time. So I'm a big believer that when you're in sales, that you're never done learning, and there's always something more that you can do. So I'm a big believer that the SDR's job starts once you get that yes from the prospect that they're willing to take a meeting. That's where the kind of art of sales starts, is around discovery, right? So we look at things like, I would look at the SDR's talk time, and are they just booking meetings to book meetings, and there's no real kind of business problem or need, and the prospect's just bored and taking a meeting for taking a meeting's sake? Or is it that the SDR is actually doing a really good job qualifying out, yes, they have a problem, it's worth solving, it's worth investing in, when ideally they'd like to have something like this in place, who they're looking at from a competitive standpoint, right? If they're doing that, chances are, there's a problem on the sales executive side, and we're quick to spot that and make changes where appropriate.
How big is the team, guys?
So we've got so it's matrixed across sales and account management, and then we have SDRs for both. So we've got, I want to say 15 SDRs and 11 new business sales executives. Mm-hmm. And then we've got, I want to say 6 or 7 account managers and 3 or 4 SDRs that are of the account management flavor. So I'm not a math guy. What is that? 15? Yeah, close to 30, over 30 or so people.
Well, actually, so then for the account, the SDRs were tied to the account managers. Is there a main area going at trying to surface new revenue, like extra divisions, or are they?
Yep.
Like, so it makes sense. That's not as common. How are you guys using SDRs to help out the account management growth?
Yeah, so we call them account specialists, and their goal is to
Good
help.
marketing.
Yeah,
Position.
yeah. Their goal is to really help the account manager. So the account manager's goal is to manage the net growth and retention of customers. And so it's very much a new business sales role. And so we land account A, and the new business sales executive holds on to that account for a year, right? So they've got a year to do all their upselling, and then we peel them off and introduce them to a more stable resource that is going to manage the relationship from there. So the account specialist, at the end of the day, it's the same job. It's just one is fishing in a pond of current customers and going in down the hall into different divisions and different applications of our solution. And one is just calling up prospects.
Do the goals, like the 30 appointments, 10 follow-ups, change, or are they the same for the?
They're pretty similar. I think they're a little south of that, but they're aggressive and they're fairly similar.
Cool. I wanted to, one of the things we sort of talked about pre-call, and it was in the sort of show notes, was you sort of stumbled across, or you were, some of your reps maybe struggled with happy years. Can you tell me about, what happened there and what you guys did to overcome that?
Yeah. So, it's across the board from an SDR to, the quota bearing guys, gals, a lot of times. So we've invested in some technology to kind of measure the substance of conversations that we're having, both on the SDR front as well as on the sales new business sales executive side. So a lot of times we'll have people coming out of demos going, I nailed it. They were talking about pricing. They want a proposal. And, we go back in the pipeline review and just have it this morning. It's like, hey, that's great. So what's the problem on their end? They kind of look at you like, wait, what do you mean? Like, well, if they don't have a business problem, like they're not going to buy. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, that's a tire kicker. So that's the happy years front. I think on the SDR side, that's around, you kind of using the enthusiasm of, or the euphoric feeling that you get when you knock down that demo, that meeting that you book with that prospect that you've called 80 times, they've never picked up, and you're just happy to get the meeting and you kind of hang up, right? So it's grounded in taking an objective look at sales process and making sure that you're doing the things that you need to do to remove emotion out of the equation, which is tough because sales is a very emotional sort of roller coaster type of profession, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Sounds almost like you have a bit of a checklist, or these are the criteria for each step.
Yeah, you could say that. We've got a lot of checklists. We've got a lot of sales process, because in the past we didn't have a ton of it. It was the wild west, in the Series A and even B. It was just throw enough stuff up against the wall and hopefully it sticks. And as we've grown and evolved, we've had this problem of opportunities getting converted into our pipeline, sticking around for 6 to 12 months before ultimately we kill them, and that's no good. That gives a false indication to sales management and the board of results that probably aren't coming. So we've had to really focus in on slowing down to really speed up. When you slow down and you do it the right way, you see deals really accelerate through the pipeline and close. And that starts with the SDR, right? And again, to my comment around, your job really begins as soon as you get that person interested in taking a meeting. Okay, so where do you take it from there? We look at talk times for SDRs, and the ones that actually are able to keep people talking and asking them questions and layering in stories. Those are usually the best ones, and those are the ones that do well in a quota bearing role. right? It's not just a meeting setter type of profession. It's, you think of yourself as a salesperson and not a meeting sort of booker. And that as a mentality really goes a long way for the ones that are serious about the profession.
Yeah, you're the setup guy for your account exec or your account engineer or sales engineer or whatever it is.
Yeah, it all starts with that interaction. If you've got a good interaction with that, that you're the beginning point, you're the tip of the spear to the market, and their impression of GuideSpark is going to be formed by you. And it's an important one to get right.
Mm-hmm. John, I know you've shared a lot of your handbook for the SDRs at GuideSpark, and I know it sort of details a lot of that process there. Can you maybe share a couple of pieces that, for the SDRs that are out there listening that maybe have happy ears? What are some of the things that you'd advise them to maybe slow down and think about or address on the call before they just sort of book that meeting and add another number to their dashboard in Salesforce?
Yeah, I think there's an old saying in sales, and it's true. It's you've got to be protective of your time, and while we have relatively high meeting quotas, it's all about making sure that our job as sales professionals is to understand, relatively speaking, if the person that we're talking to is a good fit for what we do. And if it's not a good fit, that's okay. Like, chances are it's not going to be a fit anyways, but you want to get that answer ahead of time. Don't just book meetings to book meetings, because then you get, a sales executive going in and doing a bunch of meetings with people that are never going to buy it to begin with. And all of a sudden they get through their, a month worth of meetings and they've got no pipeline and nothing to show for it. Like, those hour-long sessions add up. That's 30 hours that, that sales exec could have used to, work a deal or do some cold calling themselves. So
good reminder for people not to base comp, primarily on just number of meetings either scheduled or that happened, because there's too much possibility for questionable quality.
Yeah, comp definitely drives behavior, which is, there's a quality sort of component to that too. And, if ultimately, if somebody's got a business problem or a pain and, you've got a solution for it, you're going to want to know that, right? And but it's up to you to set meetings with those folks. And if you're going to just set meetings with tire kickers, it's going to come out the other end. It's going to be pretty transparent in the process, and you're not going to make any money that quarter, right?
Mm-hmm. You mentioned if it's for the rep, if it's not a good fit, how do you guys define? Like, do you have some pre-qualification criteria for your SDRs and who they can go after?
Yeah, so we go after HR specifically, and what we're trying to do with ideally we're going to get a meeting with somebody that likely has a problem that we solve. And so what we want to do is we want to arm the SDR to set a kind of here at Acme Widgets, we have this widget that's going to help you do this feature, like feature dump, and turn around on them and really engage in a dialogue. So I guess let's say, like, we've got personas and we've got problems and goals and customer stories and questions that they can ask to help get that dialogue going. And it might start out with if I'm calling into a VP of compensation, I'd say, hey, Collin, Jon Parisi with GuideSpark. Hey, given that most managers are unfamiliar with how to make compensation decisions that are consistent with your compensation philosophy, and as a result, top performers tend to leave, wanted to know if that's an issue that you might be, that you might be experiencing, and if so, if there was a way that I could show you how we could fix that, would that be worth a half hour of your time? Right? So
Geez, I'm ready to say yes.
you're leading in with the problem that that person's going to have, and you don't have to, that's the beauty with the model is like, you don't have to do any account research ahead of time. That person on the other end, if they have that title, they're going to have that problem. It doesn't matter what company they work for, how big the company is, where they're located.
Yeah, it's like when you do your research on the industry segment and reduces what you have to do per company, person.
Yeah.
But I think this is a great point to mention that you have generously offered to share what you have. You have a couple of conversation aids. These are sort of like one sheet summaries. In fact, I'm just going to take a risk here and see if I can share my screen. If it doesn't work, let's go right back. But so we'll have to, I guess we'll post a link along with the interview, but it's a little bit mangled here, but this is a one-page, for a cheat sheet for the compensation buyer. So for SDRs, and then there's another page around like challenge questions and like a little mini customer stories. So these are great, but we can share these with readers / listeners. We'll just have to put them up someplace. So anyway.
Yeah, I'll add them into the show notes after this call. So if you're on the site and you're looking for these links, just have a look down below and they'll be in the show notes.
There you go.
Perfect. Yeah, I love the way you guys organize those conversation starters. And one of the things that, John, you were telling me about, before we started recording was about your 3x3 and how because the pitch example you gave us, that was to, a certain level. The way you explained it, it would change if you had reached the CEO, or if you'd reached a VP, director, et cetera. Can you maybe explain a little bit more about how you guys coach your team on that?
Yeah, for sure. So the 3x3 model is something I learned early on in my sales career, and just one of those things. I don't know where it came from, but it was taught to me, and I applied it, and it actually worked. And so if you think about in an organization, you've got kind of lower level people, mid-level people, and senior level. So if you think about a triangle, at the top you've got a VP, in the middle you've got your director and your manager, and at the bottom you've got an analyst, right? And so the 3x3 model is kind of walking up and down that chain of command to make sure that your value prop resonates against the goals, problems, and needs of each one of those folks in the chain of command. So, for example, if I were to sell a call dialer type of software to heads of sales, I wouldn't call a head of sales and say, "Hey, Mr. Head of Sales, this is Jon Parisi with Acme Dialer Company. Here at Acme Dialer Company, we have this dialer technology that helps your SDRs have more conversations in a day, and it has a really cool domino." And right, the VP of Sales is going to say, "I don't care, like click." But if I let in with, "Hey, Mr. VP of Sales, I understand as a head of sales for a venture-backed startup company that your sales targets are quite aggressive, and it's a challenge to hit or beat those each and every year, especially at your stage. And if there was a way that I could show you how a small investment could increase your team's productivity to get more revenue in the door quicker, is that worth a half hour of your time?" Right. And so, that VP of Sales might say yes, because his goal is to obviously hit or beat his number. His problem is, there are a lot of forces going against him in that, and he needs ways to kind of do that. So he's going to task his VP to go out and, find a way for him to hit his number. And all of a sudden the VP gets tasked with, okay, I've got to go find a sales recruiter, or I've got to go find a piece of technology that helps me, get to my VP sales number. And then that VP may task somebody in sales ops to say, go find technology that's going to help us move the needle on the sales front, right? And so that previous pitch might work with that sales operations person, but it's not going to work with VP. So the goals, problems, and needs of each level, or the goals and problems, will drive or the needs of the level above will drive the goals, problems, and needs of the level below. So you're going to vary your pitch depending upon who you're talking to in the value chain.
Yep. So you mentioned, so for example, that's an opener. Sounds like if you found someone on the phone, but for the meetings that your SDRs are setting up, and let's take maybe the initial ones at 30 a month goal, how many do you feel get set up primarily through, say, email versus the phone? Do you have a mix? Do you guys focus on one or the other, 50-50? Is it dependent on the SDR? How do you see those and what's more effective? Or is it an X factor also with social? Or
yeah, so we don't do a ton of social, right or wrong. We just don't. But I could actually pull that up. So we actually track that, and we've tracked that for quite some time. You know, the source of the meeting, was it a phone call or an email? I think we're at like the 70-30 phone call to email ratio.
So 70% set up through a phone call.
Yep.
30 through email. And is it where they're generally calling them and they just catch them at the right time? Or do they often schedule it through email? Okay.
Yeah, we use email as a way to warm up our call.
Yep.
Right. And so a typical call cadence, there's a lot of schools of thought around, what's the magic number to get in front of somebody? Is it, 7 touches, 3 voicemails, and 4 emails? And I don't think anybody's going to ever figure that out with any degree of reliability, because as soon as somebody figures out the formula, the buyers respond and the formula changes.
Exactly. Yeah, because there is no single answer.
Yeah, the best time of the week to call is Thursday. Well, guess what? Everyone's calling it Thursday.
Yeah.
People aren't going to pick up. They're going to pick up Monday morning. So,
actually, I like to say, I get these questions like, well, should I call email, or should I call email? Because I don't know what to do.
Yeah. Done is better than perfect. Pick up the phone. We try to get in front of people and catch them live. There's no real rhyme or reason. I mean, if you think about how often you're at your desk, are you going to be at your desk?
I wish I had a desk.
More or less, depending upon right? It's a random sort of thing. So just persistence. Like we might call somebody 80 times before we actually get a live connect.
Yeah. You guys use a main calling tool for that?
We do. Yeah, we used Inside Sales, InsideSales.com's Power Dialer.
Yeah, pretty common.
And long time.
Where all my old Salesforce friends are now these days.
Yeah.
Great. Some are happy and some aren't.
Yeah.
Cool. Do you measure, what other kinds of measurements do you do around calling? So you mentioned talk time was one. One thing you care about. I mean, obviously you can measure a bunch of things, but as a manager, what do you care about around calling, dials, this, that, the other?
Yeah, similar to measuring, I think a common mistake for measuring meetings is like they'll measure and comp on booked meetings.
Yeah,
it's almost like measuring and comping off of phone calls, right? We've actually found, by surprise, towards the end of the quarter, there are SDRs that haven't hit their call number, and what they'll do is they'll call that number, 100 times and hang up, and hang up. Just kind of juice, right?
Yeah, or on Sundays.
So yeah, call times. We have a dashboard kind of called fake dials. So the idea is not to be on that. Measure talk time, not formally, but informally, just to get a sense for who are the ones having the most substantive type of conversations. Across my team, I measure phone calls. I measure meetings that the sales executive books themselves. Because at the end of the day, if your SDR is on vacation for 2 weeks or they're having a difficult month, it's still up to you to make sure that you're doing the amount of activity that's going to get you set up for success. So it's almost like, if you over rely on your SDR, it's very easy as a sales rep to say, my SDR didn't get me the meetings, that's why I'm not successful.
Yeah, that ain't going to fly.
That's not going to fly. Like, okay, well, great, I'll just go to my VP of sales and say the SDR had a bad month and, reduce the quota. Not how it works, right? So so I measure them on really the amount of meetings that they're doing, the pipeline that they're creating, whether or not they're following sales process. So in pipeline reviews, we use another tool called Gong, where it's a bit of a BS filter, but it's a great coaching tool. Help us go through deals and actually what's happening on the call.
It's a Gong IO or Gong AI. I've seen that name someplace.
Yeah, Gong IO.
Gong.io. Yep.
Yeah.
IO is getting so outdated now. Or something new.
Yeah.
Anyway. Well, hey, other facts. So just, I was at SASTR. We were at SASTR recently. And one of the panels I led was called "How to Build Your First Outbound Team." How to get it right the first time. And it was packed. But one of the I would say it's surprising that there was 3 panel leaders, and they built multiple teams for the most part. But one thing they agreed on was, and they were all practitioners of predictable revenue too. In fact, one had been a client at one of the companies. Another had worked at one point. I mean, they'd done multiple teams, so some of that. But they said that between email, the phone, and social, the phone was number one. They're the most important tool, and I know email gets all the attention, and I'm actually probably a big contributor to that. And I don't know if it's because now there's enough email that phone differentiates, or phone just connects to people. Like when you can hear someone's voice, if you can get them, it's email is one dimensional. At least phone is 2-dimensional.
Yeah.
Something about it, but yeah, everyone agreed, and we've seen this too. When people do phone plus email, it can double results over just email. So that was interesting to see that.
Yeah, phone is there's no substitute for having a live conversation, right? And I'd say you're probably using email as a mechanism to actually have that conversation. So it's a tool to help you have that. No sale is ever done through just email exchange.
Yeah, no, it's email is a way to get to the phone.
Yeah, for sure.
So I know it's still common. Lots of people are afraid of. We have generations growing up on email with no phone, so there's still a lot of phone fear in the younger ones. Speaking of which, question: average age of a lot of SDRs, and related to that, how do you manage? How impatient are they or not? Morale or not? At what point, if they're there before you'd said, actually, I think prep that they usually 12 or 13 months is a typical tenure. At what point do you see people start to struggle motivation-wise, and then what do you do about it? Super common question with, I don't know if we're still on millennials or if it's the next Gen Z group yet.
Yeah, it's a tough one. And I think that's, I'll share a personal story in a little bit, but, we've had some issues with that, not only kind of that sort of runway, and it's a tough gig, right? How do you do it for 2 years and not get a little frustrated or monotonous, right? I get it.
If you're any good at it, it does. That's the paradox. Is the people that you want to hire are the ones who are going to get bored within.
Yeah, there are opportunities, especially here in the Bay Area. It's almost like perfect optionality, right? And I think why people stick around here is, I think there's a certain level of experience around the table that is helping guide young, relatively inexperienced but very impressive talent through their career. And the goal of our SDR program is to ultimately bring that young and raw, hungry talent through the pipeline. So we skew relatively younger, early stage career, they're entry level, or they've had 1 to 2 years experience. But the idea is, you bring it through the pipeline, you help us support our outbound efforts, they grow their sales career in return. And once they're in a position to get promoted, it's like, everything they've done up to that point sort of just becomes table stakes. And it's like when I got my Series 7 back in the day, I studied for what seemed like months and months and months, and really kind of put a lot of effort into it. And once I got it, I remember my branch manager saying, "Well, that's great, kid, but all it really means is that you're minimally competent in this next investment advice." I remember hearing that, saying like, "Well, thanks a lot, man." But it's really similar from SDR to AE, and I speak to a lot of our former SDRs who are currently AEs today, both here and elsewhere, and they always come back to like, when they felt like they couldn't make a single dial, right? They felt like they've reached the pinnacle of their development, and in the SDR role, there's a feeling of kind of, hey, I've plateaued, I've done this, and you always say, hey, be patient. There's always more that you can learn, and they might not believe you at the time, but they usually come back and say, you know what, yeah, you were right. And that's the reason why I love sales. And so I think it's important as sales leaders, sales development, or whoever, has a system, that's really centered around, experienced sales reps and sales management, that if you feel like you mastered cold calling, great, learn how to run a demo. If you're getting good at demos, try working with your SE or AE to get deals that are kind of stuck in the pipeline unstuck, right? Use some creative ways of account research. Drop something on your prospect that talks about a quote that their CEO just mentioned in a recent Investor Day transcript, or work on your leadership skills, right? You can mentor somebody else. You might want to gain exposure to other parts of the organization, lead a cross-functional team with marketing to help work on a project. Go help us hire some interns, right? I think, that's been a struggle for us because it's a transition that we haven't figured out quite yet. But, I was in that same position too, right? If I were thinking about advice to give myself back in the day, would be to, be patient. I was one of those hotshot SDRs that thought, I had it all figured out, and I jumped at the first opportunity to have a quota-bearing role, and I failed miserably. I wasn't ready, and I was put on a few performance plans, and that was kind of a tough lesson to learn. And looking back, I definitely should have been fired, but one thing, I should have been fired twice, but I wasn't. But one thing I learned from a mentor of mine was like, just focus on what you can control. I said, if I'm going to fail, then I'm going to outwork everybody in the process. And people notice that grind factor, and somebody must have saw it and believed in me. And I'm glad that I did. But it's hard to give that perspective to somebody that's 22 and is worried about
or impossible.
Yeah, they're worried about scraping together enough couple nickels for the weekend for some beers, right? And they're looking at that quota bearing role, and if you've got to have a development program that is designed to help keep them engaged and further their career in sales. And that's the thing. I've been at this for 15 years, and I'm still learning every single day, and that's the beauty about the profession.
Yeah, actually, from Impossible book, one of the points we make is, the company's not your mommy and daddy. It's not their job to make it interesting. Like, it's 50, maybe half their job and half your job to find out what interests you and to figure it out.
Yeah. Yep.
So, usually not, again, a simple answer, but.
It definitely sounds like you like GuideSpark and Jon, you and your team, you invest a lot in helping these SDRs, like you said, recruiting the raw talent and really shaping them into the sales leaders of, that are going to rise up at GuideSpark. I got one last question. Just, you guys do all this, it seems like you invest so much in your team. Have you ever, what's something you maybe screwed up in the early days at GuideSpark?
How much time you got? Early days, we screwed a lot of things up. I think looking back, I'd have to say hiring. We were at a point where we grew from 2 SDRs to 4 to 10 to 15. I think at our peak we had 41 SDRs.
Yep.
Well,
And, we took some flyers on some people that, we probably shouldn't have. We liked them as people, but at the end of the day, they just weren't cut out for sales. And, the other day we just had a colleague of mine ask, hey, would you like to spend 20 minutes with this candidate? I'm kind of lukewarm on him, but, he doesn't really have the energy or the enthusiasm. He sent me kind of a really kind of lazy follow-up after our conversation. But, he was pretty sharp. He was thoughtful and experienced. And I said to him, hey, man, like, if you don't love his energy, enthusiasm, then cut it, right? He's not a fit. Unless he's somebody that we feel really strongly that can succeed, is wired the right way, or could be the next, name a top performing SDR on our team. Like that's kind of like the test. If we feel like this person could grow into somebody that's kind of at the top of their game, then pass. And we didn't do that in the beginning. We still made some killer hires, and it was probably more luck than anything else. And similarly, we had some folks that made it through the process that probably shouldn't have made it through. And then the double whammy was we held on to them a bit longer than we probably should have. And that's something that we're still trying to figure out, but I think we're getting better at.
Awesome. Jon, I think everybody on this call is probably, or on this episode here, has probably made that mistake of hanging on to people too long. And I think on that note, we've probably hung on to this episode for the right amount of time. So why don't we use that terrible segue to call it here. Jon, I want to thank you so much for coming on. I know I'm going to hit you up after this for that handbook and see what we can share, what we can't share with the audience. But really, man, thank you so much for coming on.
Cool. Thank you, guys. This was fun. Let's do it again.
Thanks, Jon.
Definitely.